It's always fascinating to watch how companies that have been around forever deal with big changes in their industries. And well, right now, one of those changes is happening with WW International. It used to be known as Weight Watchers. And reports are suggesting they're getting ready to declare bankruptcy. This all comes after, of course, their stock did a huge nosedive, dropped almost 59%, down to just 18 cents a share. And well, it seems like there are a couple of things really driving this. First, you have the financial struggles they've been up against, obviously. But then at the same time, you've got this surge in popularity of these new weight loss drugs. Now, Wegovy from Novo Nordisk is a big one. And they offer, a different approach. For a lot of people, it seems like a much faster route to managing their weight. And weight management, it's a growing global health concern. So, it makes sense that people are turning to these new options. But of course, WW International, they've always taken a very different approach, haven't they? Much more focused on the nutrition side of things and behavior changes, that sort of thing. They did try to adapt, though. And last year, in 2023, they went and acquired Sequence. It's a telehealth platform, runs on a subscription basis. And, well, the idea there, it seems, was for them to jump into the obesity drug market themselves. They were recognizing that the whole landscape was changing and trying to find their place in it. But, their stock tells a story, and it doesn't look great. Just a few years ago, back in 2018, their stock was, up at $100 a share. But the decline really started last year. Falling revenues, concerns about whether they could meet their short-term financial obligations, liquidity, that sort of thing. And then, of course, you had Oprah Winfrey leaving their board. Now, I couldn't help their public image, and she was so associated with the brand for so long, it must have been a major blow for them when she left. So where do things stand right now with WW International? Well, from what we're hearing, they're in discussions with their lenders and bondholders trying to work out some way to restructure their debt. And apparently these discussions are separate from any larger market trends or, international trade situations. And we're talking about some serious debt here too. Reportedly, it's something like $1.6 billion. That's a pretty substantial amount to deal with, especially when your core business model is, facing this kind of disruption, which brings us back to those GLP-1 agonists, right? Ozempic and Wegovy are the big names, both using semaglutide. They're really shaking things up in the weight management industry. WW International, they've built their brand on low-calorie diets and dietary advice. But these new drugs, they work in a totally different way to achieve weight loss. And you have to look at the prescription numbers, too. In the U.S., just in the year leading up to March, we saw at least 3 million prescriptions written every month for GLP-1 agonists. That includes tirzepatide, which is in drugs like Mounjaro and Zepbound. So there's definitely a big shift in how people and healthcare providers are looking at weight management these days. And, Morgan Stanley, they've made some projections about the future of these drugs. And they estimate that by 2035, something like 24 million Americans will be using GLP-1 medications. That's about 7% of the entire population. So, a sizable portion of the market. So how are the other big diet companies responding to this wave of pharmaceutical options? Are they all trying to bring these drugs into their business models? Well, it seems like some of the big players are, but WW International, even though they bought Sequence, they've still been really focused on behavior change as the main path to weight loss, though they have started these virtual clinics, offering personalized plans and helping with getting prescriptions, especially for people who are looking for more, substantial weight loss. So it seems like they're trying to strike a balance, acknowledging that the drugs are effective, but also sticking to their core philosophy, what they built their brand on. Seema Sistani, she was the CEO of WW International, and she actually said that the industry was shifting its thinking about weight loss, that it's becoming more the healthcare issue and less about, just personal choice or vanity, which is interesting, right? Because the weight loss industry has always been so tied to lifestyle and self-improvement. And it's worth remembering where WW International came from. Yeah, Jean Medich, she founded it back in 1963, though some sources say she actually started it in 1961. And her own personal experiences, and Dr. Norman Jolliffe's prudent diet, those were big influences on her. And over the years, WW International, they really became a force in the weight loss industry, didn't they? They had all sorts of diet plans, they had publications, they had membership, and of course they had those big celebrity endorsements, Oprah Winfrey, Jessica Simpson, those sorts of names. They really built a recognizable and influential brand. So, they had this really strong foundation, but when did things start to go south for them? Well, things started getting worrisome back in March of 2023. Their shares hit a record low and their sales were dropping. And then, like we mentioned earlier, Oprah Winfrey left the board. That definitely fueled the worries, especially since she came right out and said that she was using weight loss medication herself. It must have sent a confusing message to a lot of people. I mean, you had the face of this brand, a brand that was built on on diet and willpower, and she's admitting to using these drugs, and the financial contrast is pretty stark too. Right now, WW International is valued at like $33.3 million. But remember, they were once worth $6.7 billion. And Novo Nordisk, the company behind Ozempic, they're valued at a mind-boggling $2.6 trillion. The market is definitely sending a clear message about where the future lies. And it seems like WW International has been trying to get their finances in order. Reports say they recently withdrew all the funds from a loan that was due in April 2026. They said it was to give them more financial flexibility. But on top of that debt that's coming due soon, they've also got major loans and bonds coming due in 2028 and 2029. It all adds up to over $1.4 billion on top of that $175 million that was due in 2026. So they've got a pretty big financial burden to deal with. And they're not the only ones feeling the pressure either. Jenny Craig, another big name in the diet world, they actually shut down in May of last year. They were buried under a mountain of debt too. It seems like this is a bigger trend that's affecting all these established diet companies. And WW International, they even tried to get into the weight loss injection game themselves, launched their own weight loss injection last year. It was a pretty big change for them, considering they'd always been all about diet and behavioral strategies. But it doesn't look like it was the solution they were hoping for. And after that, Seema Sistani, the CEO, she stepped down. She'd been in the role for 2 years. And now, Cara Comonte, she's a board member, and she's the interim CEO while they look for someone permanent. Comonte has said that she has confidence in the current team and their plans for growth. But, these bankruptcy reports, they're not exactly encouraging. This whole situation really highlights the dramatic changes that are happening in the weight management world. These new drugs, they're so effective. And they're really creating problems for companies like WW International that have dominated the industry for so long. And, them trying to incorporate telehealth and prescription services, it just shows that the whole industry is trying to figure out how to deal with this new reality. And the fact that WW International might be filing for bankruptcy, it underscores how big of an impact these drugs are having. It really makes you wonder what's going to happen to these traditional diet and wellness programs now that these drug therapies are so readily available. It's a big question, and it's something that we as a society need to think about. How are we going to approach weight management moving forward? Is it going to become more and more healthcare focused, or are we going to stick with these traditional lifestyle and behavioral approaches? A lot to think about as this whole story unfolds. Well, that's about it for today. We hope you found all this interesting and that it gave you some things to think about. If you did, please, like and subscribe to get more insights into how industries are changing and what's happening in the markets. Until next time, be sure to like and subscribe.